Hi and welcome to this week's Mailbox, where the vast majority of the comments, and therefore the vast majority of the time, will be spent on the storyline, I suppose, that's been coming out recently, in particular after the burning of Teldrassil. But there will also be a few little comments at the end that have got nothing to do with any of those as well. But yeah, it's mostly going to be a Sylvanas Alliance Horde type thing. Right, first of all, the winners from the Where's the Mailbox from last week. There were a few people got it. There were 6 people specifically. It was indeed Wildhammer Stronghold, which was in Shadow. So I can't even get it right. Shadowmoon Valley, sorry, but the Outland version of it. You could sort of tell by the greenish thing there. Someone put a comment here. It says, "Have you ever wondered how they got all that there? Shadowmoon seems quite the trek from Khazmodan." I think the clues can be found in the giant barrels behind me, which I'm sure are probably largely empty now. I'm pretty sure dwarves can get anywhere on beer. I mean, think about it this way. Stonehenge, for example, the stones, that's in Wiltshire. For people that don't know, that's in the boring part of England, middle of England. The stones for it came from Wales, miles away. And they didn't have, like, lorries or roads then. So, you give people enough, like, alcoholic beverages and you'll be amazed where they can take things to. Right, this week's, you have to say where this one is. It's another Horde one. And not be able to do many Horde ones, actually, because every time I try and go around and find mailboxes with Horde ones, I mean, this one is actually pretty easy. This is the 10th one I went to when I was trying to find one, because all the others I'd gone to have, like, a named NPC, and because you can't get rid of the nameplate, made it too easy. So this one is actually pretty easy, but I thought, well, it's about time I did another Horde one. So anyway, what you need to do is to say exactly where it is. That's the specific location and the zone it's in the comments below. And let's get on with some actual statements from this week. So let's get ready to annoy people. So the first one, in terms of the, Horde evil, Alliance not evil type thing. So, someone's saying there's been evil characters from the Alliance? Who? I can only think of one, Edwin Van Cleef's daughter. Well, no, there have been a number. There have been quite a large number. No, I'll just go into the second statement here, because I will obviously talk about Arthas. Arthas is the obvious one. Because Arthas obviously does not count, since he was acting from being corrupted by Frostmourne, not his own will. Now, everything after that point, yes, that's true. But before that point, it's not. So what he did in Strathhome and what he did in Northrend up to pulling the sword was entirely Arthas. That was Arthas. He was led by breadcrumbs there by Mal'Ganis, but nonetheless, his actions were his own. He hadn't been corrupted until he pulled the sword. So everything he did. Now, but here, the Arthas... and people talking, for example, about, it's Arthas that killed... Well, not killed Sylvanas, but turned her into a Banshee and therefore made Sylvanas, so it's the Alliance's fault, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't count, because at that point he wasn't a member of the Alliance, and indeed he was also, corrupted by someone else's will. So that, he wasn't a part of the Alliance. But the key thing is, the Arthas is a really good example of it, because with what Arthas did in Strathhome and with what Arthas did in Northrend, in terms of burning his own ships and all the rest of it, and he did all that as part of the Alliance. He was part of the Alliance at that point. There's no getting away from that. But it wasn't in line with the wishes of the leaders of the Alliance. His king, his father, the king, Terenas Menethil, he did not approve of the sacking of Strathhome. He certainly wouldn't have approved. The reason why Arthas burnt his boats was because his father had ordered him back to Lordaeron. And he was having none. He was like, no, I'm not going back. So he was basically doing things that were outside of his authority and certainly not part of the wishes of the Alliance. And that is the key difference. Whereas when you look at the 3 main aspects of, well, let's say 4. 2 of them are sort of rolled into one. So first of all, there's the invasion of Azeroth by the Orcish. It was just the Orcs then. Now, that was all entirely them. That wasn't a few orcs doing something on the sly. It's not like in the film, the actual story. The leaders are all up for it. That's what they want. And people will say, they're corrupted by Manroth's blood. They took the blood specifically to become more warlike. The leaders, Grom actually says in Warcraft 3 that they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were taking, this stuff. There was no secrets about it, really. They wanted to become more savage. They took this thing to become more powerful because, and they wanted to make war. So, although, their actions weren't always their own after that, they knew what they were getting themselves into. Then when they got to Azeroth, because you'd think, well, dying world Draenor, well, who killed it, first of all? But, okay, dying world Draenor, they want to go to a new world. Instead of trying to settle somewhere, they made war with Stormwind. And again, that was all to do with the leadership. Then much later on, if we go much later on, the bombing of Theramore. That again was directed by the leadership. Again, so it wasn't just a rogue element within the Horde doing something naughty, as is the case with all of the Alliance ones. And then finally, the burning of Teldrassil, most lately. Again, it's the leadership doing that, not just a rogue element within it. And that's the key difference. So, there are certainly examples of the same sort of wickedness. Like Jaina, for example. Jaina wishes to do to the Horde some of the things that Garrosh and Sylvanas have already done to the Alliance. That wouldn't make her any better. The fact that there's an event that's triggered it. Well, you can argue there's an event that triggered in Garrosh what he was doing, and there's an event that triggered in Sylvanas, much more the case in terms of what she was doing, and various other things. There's always a reason. Now, every bully always has a bullying story of their own, don't they? They're, every tyrant is also a victim. But at some point you have to sort of take responsibility. So, yeah, Jaina could be cast in the same light. But again, she doesn't have the support of the Alliance. Therefore, she's not been able to carry out these acts. Because the Alliance isn't really with her on that. The leadership has said to her, no. And I think that's the difference there. Now, one related thing to this, something that, again, to do... Because one of the main themes that's going to come out here is just that it doesn't matter about the storyline. I mean, the storyline's the storyline. I mean, just get over it. It's actually quite funny. I wish I'd got the image for it. I saw someone had done a meme with a Sylvanas going, "What, did you expect me to be the peace chief?" I mean, we should expect it. The war itself is just the war. Because, when you, as a faction, you give the title of your leader war chief, obviously you are a faction that expects to be at war a lot. Otherwise, it's a bit, it's a bit of a funny title to give someone if you expect it to be a peaceful faction. So let's make no bones about it. The Horde is not a peaceful faction. It's not meant to be a peaceful faction. Even the so-called honourable ones like Saurfang are not beings of peace. He doesn't want peace. He says that the Orcs, specifically the Orcs rather than the Horde at large, need war. He just doesn't want to kill civilians, really. That's his main thing there. He doesn't disapprove of the war, for example, you'll notice. He doesn't disapprove of the war. He disapproved of the murdering of civilians. And he disapproved of his own actions in interfering with the duel between Sylvanas and Malfurion, which we'll come to later. But you notice that it is cinematic, that old soldier thing, which a lot of people are raving about, and I just think, well, it's a good cinematic, but it gives us nothing extra. What would have been a better cinematic? But I don't think Blizzard would have wanted to do this. What would have been a better cinematic that really would have told us something and advanced the story is, what the hell do the Horde Druids, and in particular the Tauren Druids, but all of the Horde Druids, what do they think of Sylvanas burning a world tree? Because never mind the fact that it's home to the Night Elves, and, Night Elves are Alliance, and, Tauren are Horde, and they might not have, a lot of sympathy for each other. And someone was telling me a story yesterday. It was something I don't know. Because remember, I haven't done a lot of the Horde. I've done quite a lot of Horde quests because I have been Horde. Well, this is my third stint as Horde, and I have leveled characters up through Horde stuff, but not everything. About some antipathy between the Night Elves and the Tauren. But even given that, it's the fact that it's the World Tree. So they may or may not mourn the loss of the Night Elves civilians. But what do they think of Sylvanas setting fire to a world tree? I'm pretty sure Druids are not supposed to be fans of that sort of behaviour. That would have been a good cinematic. Wouldn't that have been good? You know, Sylvanas coming back to Orgrimmar, and a load of druids sat there with their arms crossed, going, right then, War Chief, what's all that about then? But no, they didn't do that, did they? Right, on to next things. So, Sylvanas. So, it says, anyone who's played WoW for a number of years should know full well how the writing goes. Sylvanas has been evil since Wrath. Cata quest lines in Plaguelands showed she was going for Lich King route. She's going to end up a raid boss or killed via a cinematic. Blizzard's writing is predictable to a fault. Well, whenever any writing is predictable, it is a fault, I would say. But I don't think it's quite this predictable. But yes, she has been going down the Lich Queen route. She wants exactly the power of the Lich King. There's even that, cutscene, isn't there, from Cataclysm? Is it Cataclysm? Pretty sure it's Cataclysm. Where she invites Garrosh to come and see what she can do now with her Valkyrie. And Garrosh is like, oh, no. You'd better not be doing that with any Horde dead, any Horde fallen. But basically, he says, what is the difference now between you and the Lich King? And she says, isn't it obvious, War Chief? I serve the Horde. And then Garrosh goes, shut your clever mouth, bitch. Because he has no clever comeback, because he's an idiot. You know what warriors are like. But anyway, got a warrior jibe later on. But anyway, so yeah. What is the difference? There is no difference. And if we consider that even the Lich King, you got to remember, like Ner'zhul and Arthas were both themselves victims. You know, you can always argue the victim line of it, but we nonetheless consider them to be evil. Sylvanas is going down the same route again. What is the difference there? What is the difference? And you can argue, well, she's just wanting to swell the numbers of her people. But again, that's a shift. She used to be someone who just wanted to protect her people. You know, they were called the Forsaken because they were forsaken by their former people, the people of Lordaeron. Humans, basically the Alliance humans. And so she just tried to protect them. But from Cataclysm onwards, she actively wanted to swell their numbers. You know, this wasn't just a case anymore of... and I suppose this had to be the way from Cataclysm. So it wasn't just a case of anymore, the dead stir and they've got their consciousness, they're not, under the will of the Lich King. Sylvanas gives them a choice. Well, you could join us if you like and we'll look after each other. Because from that point on, the Lich King is no longer raising the dead. So any new raise dead, well, it's Sylvanas actively doing it now. So she shifts from just being protector of the Forsaken to actively seeking to swell their numbers. And the way you actively seek to swell the numbers is death. You create death and then raise it back up. But yeah, I still think that there's going to be a redemption thing. Because I don't think Sylvanas is the sort of character that they are prepared to kill off. But I'm going to touch on that a bit later as well. I think she's too big a character. She's the biggest character in the Warcraft story now. And she's not to be killed off. There will have to be... If there's an ending at all, it'll have to be a sympathetic ending. And I think it's coming quite soon. I still think that she's going to realise that she's been played. And she's going to sacrifice herself. Not necessarily permanently. But I think part of that sacrifice will involve her stepping back from... leadership of the Horde as a whole, but potentially even leadership of the Forsaken. She may step completely back, very much as Thrall has done. Because it's not just that he stepped back from being War Chief. He's not even the de facto leader of the Orcs anymore. He completely stepped back. He still identifies with the Horde. He still considers himself a member of the Horde. His loyalty is to the Horde, but he's stepped back from all that leadership role. I see Sylvanas doing the same sort of thing. Very much doing the same sort of thing. And yeah, that'll be a storyline repeating itself. It's not like Blizzard do that, is it? Okay, on to the next one. Now, this is really crucial. Because, remember, so it's Vol'jin that made Sylvanas the War Chief. And what I've said, and he did it based on what the lower spirits were saying to him, or so he says. And I was saying, well, it's not the lower spirits would never have gone for this, with potentially one example, but I don't think even that. So I think it's basically whispers of the old gods. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be directly from the old gods. It could still be lower spirits talking to him, because lower spirits can be corrupted by the old gods. But then that's still whispers of the old gods. If it's corrupted lower who's speaking to him. Now, what some people have said about it is, what about Bwonsamdi? He's the lower of death. He gets more powerful the more souls he gets. In times of war, obviously, he's going to get more souls. He'd be well up for it, wouldn't he? Or what's happening now, he'd be well up for it. And he sort of would. He would and he wouldn't. And so people are saying, well, Bwonsamdi could have been the one whispering to him. There's two reasons why not. Why that doesn't make any sense. The first one is that he said spirits, plural. It might sound a pedantic point, but it's an important one. And there are no other lower spirits that would have done this other than corrupted ones. And again, corrupted ones means ultimately old gods in source. So Bwonsamdi himself. Now, the story of Bwonsamdi, and this is where you have a bit of a problem with the way Blizzard tells stories, because a lot of the really important facts you need to know about are not in the game. And that's, I don't think that's right. It's fine that novels flesh things out, but they shouldn't have important plot details only contained in the book. But this is where they do. So, Bwonsamdi first emerged, there was a time, it was years ago now, was it Wrath of the Lich King, where Vol'jin needed the aid of Bwonsamdi. Okay, and he struck a deal. The deal usually ends up with Bwonsamdi getting a load of souls. And he did. It sort of went all right. Bwonsamdi now gets Dark Spear Troll souls. So when they die, they go to Bwonsamdi. That makes him more powerful. So that's where Vol'jin's gone, presumably. So that was all fine. So you'd think to yourself, so there's this nice close tie between the Dark Spear Trolls, including Vol'jin, because he made the deal, and Bwonsamdi. Yes, there is. But then later on, and this was round about Miss of Pandaria, and I didn't play Horde in Miss, and I haven't leveled a Horde character through in Miss, so I don't know if anything emerged in game, but this came from the book. Was it Shadows of the Horde or something? But the Vol'jin book. And he got involved with Bwonsamdi again. But this time, what was happening was, remember how I say, Blizzard like to reuse their storylines? Well, it happened again. So, except, Vol'jin was losing contact with the lower spirits. Bit distressing. Bit like Thrall in WoD later on, when he was losing contact with the elements. This admittedly was on the alternate Draenor. And so anyway, Bwonsamdi comes to him and basically says, it's because you're weak, man. It's because... I'm not going to try and do a Jamaican accent, by the way. That's not my attempt at that. He says, because you're weak. And you need to be strong. And he's trying to show Vol'jin visions of Vol'jin leading the Horde into glorious war with the Alliance. Blood and death, lots of nice souls for Bwonsamdi. But Vol'jin's having none of it. He's not having any of it. He's, no, that's a terrible future you're showing me. No, no, no. And it's not like Bwonsamdi went off chuntering and stuff like that. Eventually, Vol'jin wins him over, and Bwonsamdi respects him, as indeed the rest of the lower spirits do. He wins. Everyone's happy. Vol'jin becomes strong leader of the Dark Spear again, and eventually, leader of the Horde. Indeed. So there is that side of it as well. So if Bwonsamdi's going, Sylvanas will be, big battle between the Alliance and the Horde. Lots of souls for me. Isn't that great? Vol'jin doesn't think it is great. He's not going to be swayed by that. Now, I know what some people think. Some people think, but he said the lower spirits have given me clarity, as if they've given us some revelation, so it's changed his mind on something, and maybe now he is in favour of it. Then there's the next point, which someone else made, so I'll put their comment up. Well, first of all, they've actually said, just first point I ought to cover, it says, I believe your argument, but I don't think we know everything about the nature of death as a power in WoW. Now, there's a couple of things I'll say to that. First of all, we might do, because there has been an awful lot written about it. Admittedly, mostly in novels and not so much in game, which is a bit of a problem. In fact, almost exclusively in books, including the Warcraft Chronicles, which is what I was referring to. Because Sylvanas has been such a huge character, and she's been instrumental in and the Lich King himself before her, well, at the same time as her, really. A lot of death and necromantic type topics has been covered in some detail in novels. So we may actually know everything there is to know about death as a force in WoW. But even if we don't, and although I accept that they can easily contradict something that's occurred in those novels, because they do it all the time, there's lots of novels now which have been retconned, I think they will think very, very carefully about, contradicting anything in the Warcraft Chronicles, because that's supposed to be the thing that's written in stone. And I know there's already been a couple of things that are looking a bit iffy, but they said themselves, this is it now, this is it set in stone. They've put that in writing. It says it at the start of the Warcraft Chronicles that that's their intention. So if there is anything new to be learnt about the nature of necromancy and death in WoW, it shouldn't contradict what's said in there. And what's said in there, I said, you don't know what I'm pointing to. I'm pointing to the Warcraft Chronicles, is really clear. But anyway, on to the Bwonsamdi thing. So it says, Bwonsamdi is a Trollo is based on voodoo deities, and in BFA is very against undeath, because necromancy steals the souls from him. And this is true. It's actually very much like, and I don't know which came first in this particular case, now that I'm playing Warhammer, it's very much like the Warhammer storyline in Age of Sigmar. But nonetheless, but keeping it to Warcraft-related issues. First of all, don't imagine that when people die, Bwonsamdi gets more powerful because he gets their souls. He doesn't get everyone's souls. That's the important thing. He does not get everyone's souls. He gets in order to get souls. Basically, you either have to have the situation like the Dark Spear or the Zandalari, where they've pledged themselves to Bwonsamdi, and therefore he gets the souls of their people. So he mostly gets troll souls. That rhymes. That's what he mostly gets. In order to get other souls, he has to have followers go out and kill people for him. So he doesn't automatically get souls in times of war. So in a war between the Alliance and the Horde, for example, he's not getting loads. He'll get the Dark Spear troll souls. He may get some others as well, like any souls that may be the Dark Spear kill. Again, this is where I'm a little bit iffy on exactly how it works. Maybe any Alliance that are killed by Dark Spear trolls specifically might also go to him. I don't know, maybe. But generally speaking, a lot of them don't go to them. And also, as he says, the idea of still... Because although Bwonsamdi would be delighted with a big old war between the Alliance and the Horde, because he said that's what he wanted with Mop, that's what he wanted. He wanted Vol'jin to stoke that up. The idea that they would want Sylvanas to do it, again, is wrong, because she wants to raise up the dead there. And like the person has said here, and this is all true as well, he doesn't like necromancy, because it prevents him getting those souls. So, yeah, Bwonsamdi himself would not be in favour, although he'd be in favour of the path that Sylvanas has led the Horde down, he wouldn't be in favour of her doing the leading, because it works against his aims. And none of the other lower would as well. Other than potentially, as I say, corrupted lower, corrupted by the old gods, in which case that's basically what I'm saying anyway. It really doesn't matter whether the whispers have come directly from corrupted lower or directly from the old gods. It's still old gods in origin. That's what I think. And I also know that we'll find out in BFA. Because even though I haven't seen any evidence of it in the beta, it's probably later on in BFA. They did say, they talked about BlizzCon, they were dropping hints about Thrall taking Vol'jin's ashes to Zandalar. This is going to happen. We are going to find things out. And then last little one on lower, because, lower is going to be a huge thing in BFA, particularly for Horde players, of course. So it's saying, I'm thinking maybe, however, the lower spirits are looking at the long game and we only at the start. I do hope they have some really good development for Sylvanas rather than just throw away the character for a shitty storyline. Well, it would be a first. It would absolutely be a first. I've said, there's a few things in this comment I want to talk about. I've said for a lot of time, the problem, like take Rathian and Jaina as an example in Legion. Rathian and Jaina should have both been right in the thick of it. All right, Jaina threw a wobbly at the start of the expansion, but nonetheless, They both should have been right in the thick of it, and they were not. And Blizzard did some throwaway line. Oh, Jaina was fighting demons in her own way. Rubbish. But the other thing is Rathian, not a word about Rathian. Now, maybe they'll never bring Rathian back, and we can just pretend that he stumbled across a rock one day, smashed his face, and killed himself. How embarrassing, but you know what? You know, there you go. But maybe one day they will bring him back. And then people are going to ask, oh, so where was he when Azeroth was nearly destroyed by the Legion? Where was he when Azeroth was nearly destroyed by the Sword of Sargeras? Where was he when we had all the old gods attacked in the Battle for Azeroth? Where was he? And Blizzard will have to come up with some throwaway line, because the bottom line is Blizzard, once they use a character to drive, they have a storyline in mind, they decide what characters they need to drive it along, and then they use those characters. Once it's done, they throw those characters away. They discard them. They put them back up on the shelf. Maybe to use them later, maybe not. What they do not do is, even when they're not using a character, they don't ever, with a storyline, think, what are they doing in case we need to use them in the future and have to explain it. They never do that. So they don't develop characters at all. The only people who ever do that are the authors who write the novels. And all they can do is make the best of a bad situation. And there's a lot of people, for example, who've been pointing the finger at Christy Golden over this issue, like with Sylvanas and everything like that. Completely the wrong finger to point. She hasn't come up with the story. She just has to write it into some coherent form and do the best of what she can with the terrible tools that Blizzard have given her. Who's come up with this is someone who's not even an author. It's Alex Afrasiabi or someone like that. I don't know. Someone like that. Someone senior in the old World of Warcraft echelons who knows nothing about anything. These are the people who, bear in mind, came up with a storyline for Warcraft 1. The storyline for Warcraft 1 included such stunners as, oh, there's an evil warlock called Medivh in that tower. Can you go over and kill him, please? And that was it. That's the quality of the storytelling in Warcraft 1. The only reason all of this was ever fleshed out in the future was because of good authors, ones who, write best-selling novels, writing the stuff up and making sense of it and fleshing it out. So in terms of good development for Sylvanas, it would be a first. It's not going to happen, let's face facts. Then onto the lower spirits, looking at the long game. The lower spirits do not want the destruction of Azeroth. Everything that Sylvanas is doing is hell-bent on either the destruction or the corruption of Azeroth. She is absolutely doing the old god's will, right? Bear in mind, let's look at a few things. And again, this goes back to the idea that for some of these plot details, you can't possibly get it from the game. You can only get it by reading the novels, and that's terrible, but here we go. Sylvanas, when she sees the power in Azerite, the goblins show her the power in Azerite. She wants them to mine it, get mining it, back mining it. Then she finds out that doing this is harming Azeroth. Azeroth is the world they're living on. It's not in anyone's interest for Azeroth to be harmed other than the old gods. And even they don't want Azeroth killed. They just want her corrupted. Remember, they want to use it. The old gods are not about killing Azeroth. They want Azeroth, but they just want to corrupt Azeroth and turn it into this void titan. They'd be desperately fearful of anyone actually killing Azeroth. But Sylvanas doesn't give a crap. She wants the goblins to carry on apace with the mining of it, even though she knows that by doing so, she's harming Azeroth. This is a bit like, literally, the world soul is like, imagine it as a body, it's bleeding from a wound, and Sylvanas is jabbing at it, at the wound with a stick. You don't do that if you have the best interests of that body in mind. The idea that the lower spirits would ever want to put Sylvanas in is anathema to everything the lower spirits stand for. Complete anathema. They're spirits of nature. Most of the lower spirits are wild gods. Not all of them, because lower spirits is basically the name for anything that the trolls worship. But most of them are wild gods. They're basically part of the Emerald Nightmare. They're supposed to be looking after Azeroth and keeping it to the Titans' plan. So they don't want that. They don't want that at all. Anyway, let's move on. So again, this is another one. I'm talking about the book. Is I think Sylvanas sees the Alliance as aggressor or a threat because of that event with Kalia in the book. Again, no. People have tried to come up with all sorts of reasoning for Sylvanas having this war against the Alliance in that because what she says in game is she's doing it because she thinks the Alliance are going to destroy the Horde. The only way to prevent that is by destroying the Alliance. But she has no reason to do it, and the book lays this plain. For a start, she wants the war before she ever knows about Kalia, before she ever knows about Azeroth, before she knows about any of the things that she uses to justify the war. She already wanted the war, and she told Nathanos about it. She hadn't told the others about it, because she knows that the other members of the Horde would not appreciate... Well, Gallywix wouldn't give a shit, but everyone else wouldn't like it. They don't want to see themselves as aggressors. So she waited for the right opportunity. The Azeroth presented one opportunity because, of course, eventually the Alliance found out about it. Then she can start saying, oh, the Alliance, oh, they're taking Azeroth. They want to make weapons. They're going to use their weapons against us. That's one, justification for it. And then the Kalia thing, it's like, oh, no, they're deceiving us. Told you they deceived us, right? She's using all these... But she wanted the war before it. And that was made really clear in the book. And actually, you don't even need to read the book. We knew that at BlizzCon because that was revealed at BlizzCon as well. They released sections of the book, a couple of sections of the book, including the section that detailed Sylvanas planning the war against Stormwind. And this was immediately after the fall of the Legion. Immediately. Not like weeks later or months later, the day after. So which means she'd already been thinking about it herself, because this is when she just told Nathanos about it. She must already have been thinking it. And we also have to remember, and I've said this before in a video this week, think about what Sylvanas was doing while everyone else was fighting against the Legion. Sylvanas was the one major character that wasn't doing that. She played no part in the fight against the Legion. What was she doing? She was trying to get herself more Valkyr. That's it. That's what she was doing. She attacked Herja just to get more Valkyr. That's all she did in Legion. She had been planning this war while everyone else was saving the world. She didn't lift a finger to help. She just didn't stop the rest. That's all. She basically told, as war chief, told the Horde, yeah, go and fight the Legion. Avenge Vol'jin, go and fight the Legion. After that, she personally was all about doing deals with Helya, attacking Herja to get more Valkyr, which didn't work out in the end because Gen was having none of it. And, there we go. So, in no sense is Sylvanas doing anything other than destroying Azeroth. It's not her aim. It's not what she wants to do, but it's what she's nonetheless doing. And she doesn't care. Everything is about this survival aspect she has now. Now, on to the next one. So, obviously, there are a number of people who don't make excuses for Sylvanas and see her as a bad guy, and it says, I still hope a giant monster of some kind chews up the Banshee and poops her out partially digested bits as fertilizer for a new world tree. They won't. She's too big a character. She's massive. I would say for quite a while, Sylvanas and Thrall stood out as being the biggest character because they were both characters who, through Warcraft 3, all the way through World of Warcraft, in every single expansion, remained consistently relevant. And obviously, when that happens, you're going to get those characters are going to get a big following because they're always relevant. They're always involved in lots of major storylines. Now, Thrall, because there are other big characters that preceded, say, Sylvanas, like Khadgar, for example, but he hasn't been consistently relevant. Like, he didn't feature in Warcraft 3. He wasn't there in Vanilla. We saw him again in TBC, but then we didn't see him in Wrath. He didn't come back until WoD then, where he'd had a bit of a shave and turned into George Clooney. And that's the thing. But whereas Sylvanas and Thrall were always there, and they were always consistently relevant. But then Thrall has taken a back seat since then, so Sylvanas now stands alone as the biggest character in Warcraft. She is now quite literally bigger than Green Jesus. She's the pinnacle. She's the Beatles of World of Warcraft. You don't kill the Beatles off. So, yeah, they're not going to kill Sylvanas off. And they're also not going to turn her into the bad guy. The idea of turning into a raid boss, no. They're not going to turn her into the bad guy. She is the bad guy at the moment. She won't end up like that. I mean, that's why I say my theory is she finds out she's been played. You know, they discover this thing, Vol'jin's spirit. Oh, it looks like I've been fooled by old gods. She starts to realize some things happen. She starts to realize that actually the inevitable trajectory of her journey is towards the destruction of everything. It's exactly what the old gods want. She looks at it and thinks, oh shit, yeah. And she all of a sudden she does something, some event happens, we're all buggered basically, we've lost, and Sylvanas sacrifices herself, probably the cinematic to an end boss somewhere, sacrifices herself to prevent a thing. Doesn't kill her off completely, because remember, she can afford to be killed and not, die properly. But she also realises that she's a liability, and she steps back like Thrall. And so she's not going to be war chief, she's not even going to be leader of the Forsaken. That could be Nathanos Blightcaller. And but she's there, she's still a member of the Horde, she still supports the Horde, but she realises that she shouldn't really have any leadership responsibility. That's how I see it working out. I'm not saying that's how it will work out, because I don't think there's anything inevitable, because apart from anything else, Blizzard storylines don't necessarily have to make sense. And I'm not saying that that's the only thing that would make sense. It's just that I think it would make sense in terms of the path we're going on at the moment. Right, next one. So, in terms of Sylvanas and the Void, again, a lot of people keep trying to come up with things to... People have this thing. It's Nobble's fault. Bloody Nobble. People have this thing that the Void are afraid of Sylvanas. They are not afraid of Sylvanas. It wasn't even implied in the comic. It wouldn't surprise me if the author, I think that was Christy Golden as well, if she's thinking to herself, oh, bloody hell, they all think Sylvanas is afraid of the Void. Wow, I didn't intend that, but I'll go with it, because that's what Blizzard wanted to do. I was having a discussion with someone on Twitter this week and saying, whenever I see anything in either these comics or cinematics or whatever, I always think to myself, what Blizzard are trying to do is bowl a googly, which is a curveball in American. Basically, they're trying to throw us off the scent of what's really going to happen, because what they want it to be a surprise. They want, story resolutions to be a surprise. They know that we get to data mine dialogue long before it goes live, so they can't really do stuff there. The cinematics are the best way of that's their ultimate storytelling in the game, because everything else we end up data mining when it's on the PTR. So they craft it in such a way that we get thrown off, and we often do. To be fair, we often do. But this concept that Sylvanas scares the Void is a complete nonsense. And whenever people try and explain it, it doesn't make sense, or they're ignoring a fact from somewhere else. So anyway, I'll read through. So as I have a feeling that Sylvanas will play a bigger role as one of the biggest enemies of the Void in a future expansion. I think she'll end up being an enemy, like I've already said, but not in a future expansion. Now, this expansion. This expansion, BFA, is going to be the expansion where it's all concluded. I think the next expansion is going to be a completely different direction. I think, and I've said this before, they are trying to finish off the story of World of Warcraft, or the Warcraft story, and start a new one. I think they want it finished. I think that's why we had a very abrupt end to the Legion. They did this expansion to get rid of the Legion, and I think they want the next expansion to get rid of Old God's Threat. And I think they want to take everything in a new direction. Maybe with the awakening of Azeroth, because that can't keep being on the slow burner forever either. I think that because the story to me seems to be gathering pace. I think they want to get it all over and done with. I don't think this is part of I think this is the end of a story arc we're entering. I think we're entering endgame. Anyway, but that's just an opinion. It says, from what we know, written material, Sylvanas is afraid to die because only pain and nothingness await her in the afterlife. Okay, give you that one. Hence, she is not afraid to kill, betray, or destroy. Well, we also know that, because survival is the only thing she has left. I agree with that. As she mentioned during the burn of Teldrassil, life only brings pain. Well, anything she mentioned then, or anything that Sylvanas says to another, you always have to treat with a bit of skepticism, because she lies. But nonetheless, I still agree with this one, considering everything that went down with Arthas, and death is not looking any good either. Well, she is already dead. She just hasn't gone to the afterlife because she's animated. Now, this obsession with her own survival, along with her powers and an army of undead, can prove to be quite the threat for the Void beings. No, wrong. It's what the Void want. The Void want death, because death is the antithesis of life, and it's life that's keeping Azeroth out of their claws. The thing that keeps frustrating the Void Lords are the powers of life. Life itself is a force in Azeroth. It's the Emerald Dream. It's the Titan's plan, the ordering, the thing that keeps Azeroth safe until she can hatch, basically. Death is the opposite of that. It's super clear in the Warcraft Chronicle. It's so clear. It's what does my head in. Completely does my head in. It's not like you have to read all of the Warcraft Chronicles. You have to read the first 6 pages to get everything you need to know about the relationship between the Void and death, the force of necromancy. Sylvanas stands in the middle as she wants nothing to do with life or death. No, she wants death. That's what she wants. She is death. She is a force of death. She is the opposite of life. She opposes life, right? She wants to kill people to raise them up, to swell the numbers of her people. She said that. We know that. That's a fact. And, you know, you're talking about Void. The Void want that. And it says that in there. The Void want death. That's what they want. They want death. They don't care if that death is walking or not. They want it because it's the force of life that is maintaining Azeroth, that is keeping her safe, that is nurturing her. If you remove that, if you destroy that, that's why they're now corrupting lower spirits. If you weaken the force of life, the more you weaken it, the more they win. If Sylvanas destroyed everyone and raised them all back up as undead, so if all that was left moving on the surface of Azeroth was Forsaken, the Void have won. But anyway, there you go. But yeah, you need to read stuff. Okay. Now, this was a good one. This wasn't a comment to me, but this was something Noble tweeted. Now, the collector's edition has been going out to people, the physical collector's edition, which I was going to get, and I thought, no. Basically, there's a book in there which again just highlights how poorly, and this is ultimately the problem, you know, because there's two types of debates going on, I should say, at the moment. One of them is all about this, oh, you know, is Sylvanas really evil? Is the Horde really evil? Blah, 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 blah. But the other part to it is about the quality of the writing, and this just highlights how poorly written the whole thing is. And again, this is not an attack on the authors. This is an attack on the people who've come up with the story, who are not the authors. I keep saying. So, what Noble said is, that's how they describe it in the collector's edition. A wound that cannot heal. Sylvanas needed to think of a new way to inflict one. Talks to the Night Elf, gives the order, talks to Saurfang. And this is a quote, apparently, from it, which I've not read, but, you know. Remember, just to lead up to where this came from. So what happened was, Sylvanas was fighting Malfurion. She was losing, by the way. She was fighting Malfurion. Saurfang comes along. If you're a Horde player, if you're a Alliance player, you may not have seen this part of it. You'd have seen what he did, but you wouldn't have seen the lead up to it. So you go along as the Horde player. Saurfang goes, oh my god, must help the War Chief. Throw an axe into Malfurion's back. He goes, ugh. And then Sylvanas comes over and says, oh, well done. And he goes, no, I shouldn't have interfered. That was very bad of me. It was dishonourable. I had no right to do that. And she says, total bullshit. He was just wasting my time. I was obviously going to win, even though my health was a lot lower than his health. But never mind that. Then she says to Saurfang, remember, she's the one who wants to kill Malfurion, right? To deprive the Night Elves of hope. So then what she says to, although that it should have done a lot better to have attacked Tyrande, I would suggest. Because that might have worked then. Because that was another nonsense in itself. Because all you're going to do is turn the night out. Because Tyrande would be a beast of vengeance then. I mean, think how much of a, you know, a vengeful angel she already is. Imagine what it'd be like with Malfurion murdered. But anyway, never mind that. So she says to Saurfang, you know, do what you want, take his head off, and then come and join me. So then what she's saying is, because obviously he doesn't do that, this was your battle, your strategy, and your failure. Darnassus was never the prize. It was a wedge that would split the alliance apart. It was the weapon that would destroy hope. And you, my master strategist, gave that up to spare an enemy you defeated. I have taken it back. When they come for us, they will do so in pain, not in glory. That may be our only chance at victory now. So what Sylvanas is trying to say here is, she didn't want to burn Teldrassil. She wanted Malfurion dead. And she's blaming Saurfang for the fact that he's not dead, so now she has to burn Teldrassil. That's his fault. Now, that's a nonsense on a whole lot of levels. First of all, one, she's not an idiot. She knew that Saurfang was not going to kill Malfurion. He was already regretting even interfering. Secondly, if she actually wanted Malfurion dead, why didn't she kill him? She was stood over him with her bow and arrow. Easy. Why didn't she do it? She's the war chief. She's the one who wants it. She knows Saurfang isn't going to kill him. She knows that. And yet, she was somehow surprised he didn't do it. That is the most piss-poor bit of writing. That, I mean, there's been some poor examples of writing in the past. Don't get me wrong. It's not shocking. I've seen games that have got worse writing. Can't think of any offhand. But that have been. Pac-Man had terrible writing, actually, now that I come to think about it. You know, that made no sense. But anyway, what? And this is at the core of everything. Every time Blizzard give us another bit of information, it doesn't help things fall into place. It makes it worse. It's not like another piece of a jigsaw that we can slot in and go, oh, I can start to see the picture now. No, it's like someone grabbing a load of the pieces we already had in place and throwing them over their shoulder. Absolute nonsense. Anyway, that's the Sylvanas portion over. We've got a few little comments that are not Sylvanas related. So coming to the Warriors one. So, because people will know that I'm not playing with War. I don't like World PvP in WoW. It's rubbish. I do like it in other games when it's done properly. Which is not in WoW. But anyway, someone's saying, oh, scared of running to warriors like me? I don't blame you for playing the war mode off. And I actually had to say to this that warriors are the one class I'm not afraid of. And then I thought to myself, I should probably put it in here because it's not even banter. Like, I know you're thinking, oh, Asmongold's always, you know, saying paladins are rubbish. So obviously paladin's going to say warriors are rubbish. But it's not. Like, whenever I got into a world PvP situation, if I came across someone, if it was a warrior, I knew I would be able to kill them every time. Because there's a certain paper, rock, scissors element to it. And it's the only class that I've never thought to myself, because sometimes with classes I think to myself, oh, because if they're ranged, I'll just think to myself, oh, well, I'm not very good at PvP, they'll probably just kite me until I'm dead. Obviously, if I'm way better geared than them, I'll just kill them anyway, or they'll run off. Because sometimes that happens, sometimes I can't stop them running off, because, you know, I'm not exactly the fastest. It takes a while to unfold the old wheelchair, you know how it is. But sometimes it's just that I won't know enough about the abilities of that class because I don't play it enough. And I'm thinking, oh, what have they got? You know, what stuns have they got? What crowd control have they got? I don't always know. But warriors, it's like, well, what can warriors do? Warriors have to stand toe-to-toe with me to kill me. You know, they can do a bit of damage, put a rend on me or something, try and run away. But while they run away, what's happening? They've got a dot on me. I'll just heal it up. You know, there's not a lot they can do. So they can stand toe-to-toe with me. Whereas I can stun them, burst them down. There's not really a lot they can do about it. So, you know, and that's traditionally been the case. I remember in TBC, I was in a guild where the guild master was a warrior, and he used to keep challenging me to duels, and he would die so quickly. I mean, that was TBC. It was a different matter. Warriors had no chance against Ret Paladins, and no chance at all. But even, you know, more recently, I've had warriors attack me in Legion, and I don't even mean badly geared one. Mostly people that attack me are badly geared. That's why it doesn't matter what class they are. But yeah, even when they're round about the same as me, because there was one time when I was leveling, so we would have been all in pretty much the same gear. Because it wasn't early leveling as well. It was later on when I've been in more quest gear and stuff. So I wouldn't have been like really well geared then even. And it was no issue at all. So yeah, it's not even banter. I have no fear of warriors. I'm not saying it's impossible for a warrior to kill me. What I'm saying is it's never happened. And as a result, I have no fear of them. And it's the only class where I would... Actually, I've never been killed by a demon hunter either, but, I accept that they would have some nifty things. Next one, it says, I think it's clear what Blizzard wants to do with leveling. They want to make the world alive and relative again. I think you mean relevant, sorry. The entire world and not just the new expansion zones. In order to do that, they make the open world a place everyone needs to go through. But that's the bad way to do it. This is the problem. That's a terrible way to do it. What they should do is make it a place that people want to go. And what they should... It's not like I'm talking about something, a theoretical philosophy that doesn't work in practice. They should go to games where people do this anyway. Like, if we look at some other MMOs I play. So, Star Wars The Old Republic, I would say, has a similar problem. There isn't really any reason to go out into the world when you're not leveling, questing that level area. Sometimes they do events, which means you go there, but then that's the equivalent of doing, like, having world quests that Blizzard do. It's a way of just forcing you to go there. It's artificial. Other ones, Lord of the Rings Online I've been playing again recently, and that's fine. I don't mind that. I don't resent having to level up there, because there's other things I could do as well. Don't care about it. I actually like the leveling in the zones there, and that's a really old game. It's a really old-fashioned game. But that's enjoyable. Moria is less so. When I get to Moria, I'll be wanting to get through that as quickly as possible, because that's a nightmare. But everything else is actually quite fun. So they could take a leaf out of that book. But again, in terms of reasons for going to a place, there are some reasons, but it's all very grinder related. But then the best example is Elder Scrolls Online. Elder Scrolls Online has loads of reasons to go out in the world, but it doesn't compel you. It doesn't force you. It doesn't say, oh, you must go out into this zone today because we're going to give you this power up if you do it. And if you don't get the power up. There's other reasons just to naturally go out there. So Blizzard really, and I'm sure in other games that I don't play, there are also lively areas of the world that Blizzard could learn from. And that's what they should do. They should look at games where there is activity out in the world, and they should look at what exists there to compel it, without it being a forced thing. It wants to be encouragement, not forced. Because when you force something, that breeds resentment. People resent doing it. It's like World Quest. I resented doing World Quest because you felt had to do them. So as soon as you didn't have to do them anymore, don't do them anymore. Even when sometimes it would have been beneficial, I just didn't do them because I resented it. Dailies in MoP was the same thing. You had to do all those dailies it's the same thing at the start of every expansion. There's rep to get. So I had to do the dailies to get the rep. As soon as I didn't have to do them anymore, I didn't do them. Even when, to get my seal, you had to get those lucky charm things to be able to get your reroll seals. And I used to do it with pet battles, even though it took longer doing it with pet battles than it would have done with dailies. I just so resented dailies. I was just so stubborn about it. I thought, no, I'll take longer doing pet battles, because at least they don't force me to do pet battles. Even though I don't like those either. And on to the last one. So, the morally grey thing, I'm not sure. I think there's been a certain amount of Chinese whispers over this in terms of what it's supposed to be about. But anyway, was said because people like me want to play Blood Troll race. Says, I don't care how dark they are, I want dark. Darker the better. It's a game, and I want to play the dark, bloodthirsty Blood Troll. Ian said, we can't have Blood Trolls because they are black. The rest of the races are more grey than full-on black. So I think what the suggestion here is, and I don't recall Ian saying this, but I don't doubt that he did. So I think what he's potentially saying is they're okay with certain races being, as the term is used, morally grey. In other words, that sometimes they do bad things, sometimes they do good things. They're just like normal, and it's sort of okay. They don't want us to be able to play out and out evil things. Now, I would actually say on that issue that is a bit silly. You know, there are games, for example, where when you have an evil option, I play like Warhammer, for example. The armies I like to play, Warhammer. Skaven are my favourite. They're definitely an evil race. The Chaos Warriors, evil. Undead, evil. Okay, those are my favourite armies to play. You know, in Star Wars: The Old Republic, I like playing a Sith warrior. And all right, in that game, it sort of gives you the option of being a good Sith warrior. What a ridiculous idea. Do I play a good Sith warrior? Do I? Bollocks. So, you know, it's a role-playing game. We don't have to play what we would like to be in real life. You know, we can play whatever. And it is fun to play the bad guy sometimes. So I would agree with this. And the thing is as well, in World of Warcraft, that sort of exists anyway. Because warlocks are supposed to be a sort of evil class. That's why they're stuffed away, they're hidden away. In both Stormwind and Orgrimmar, the warlock place is stuffed in a hole where no one else goes to keep them out of the way. So that basically everyone can pretend that they don't approve of warlocks, but secretly they still have them in their ranks. So, yeah, it does seem to me a weird decision on Blizzard's part to not just embrace the fact that, do you know what? There's this race, and if you play this race, you're basically evil. Blurry. You're basically evil, but to hell with it, you know? Yeah, they don't like that. I don't know. Weird. So, and it's the only game I can think of. Is it the only game I can think of? I'm sure there are others. I'm not sure about ESO, really. But, yeah, there are games where you have an evil choice, and you can play that evil race or character or whatever, and no one has a problem with it. So isn't it strange? But anyway, I think that's it for the mailbox this week, other than just to remind people that you might in the next few days want to have a last little fly around, you know, Lordaeron, the outside of Undercity near Brill, because, you know, Teldrassil isn't going to be the only place on fire very soon. So, yeah, have a last little fly around. Obviously, you can still go back to these things, can't you? I know that. But in terms of how the world is going to look when you're in the current timeline, as it's going to be in a week or two's time. So I will leave you with that image. And again, don't forget, if you know where that mailbox is, comments down below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with others who might also be interested. And until next time, I'll see you later.